This is Keys to the Shop, episode 338, a conversation with Martell Mason of the Sepia Coffee Project, Detroit, Michigan. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show, and I'm really glad to have you along today. And I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to Keys to the Shop. That way you'll always be updated with new episodes as they come out. All you need to do is hit that subscribe button right now, wherever you are, unless you're driving, and you can wait. But you can hit that subscribe button and get subscribed to Keys to the Shop, and that will be awesome. Now, also, a great way to help the show out is to share these episodes. A lot of people will really benefit from the content here, but maybe they don't know about Keys to the Shop, and that's where you are key. So just go ahead and share these episodes, or just the idea that Keys to the Shop exists, with your friends and team. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about Keys to the Shop coaching and consulting. There's a lot of different ways to work with Keys to the Shop consulting. Most people start with remote consultations and coaching over the phone in a structured format that helps you walk through the process of everything from opening a new coffee bar to just very specific projects like scaling your business or revamping systems in your shop and assessing problems, etc. Another aspect of Keys to the Shop consulting is on-site cafe assessments, where we get to investigate the operations and the quality and the people that make your cafe run. Those are so very useful, last a few days. They're very intensive and thorough and always result in a lot of great positive and forward-moving change. So if any of this sounds interesting to you and you want to potentially work with Keys to the Shop consulting, just email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. We'll set up a free discovery call and hear more about what's going on in your business. Again, that email for Keys to the Shop consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, today's episode is brought to you by the Ground Control Cyclops Brewer from Voga Coffee. I'm just continually excited about the momentum and how much this is catching on across the globe. So many people have adopted the Ground Control Cyclops Brewer as their means to elevate their coffee to their customers, and it's all thanks to their award-winning design and technology. The Ground Control Brewer allows you to control the extraction of such a wide variety of flavors in your coffee. It's like getting to know your coffee all over again. It really is. So it's taking what we understand about batch brewed coffee and really elevating it across the industry. Not only does it make awesome batch brew coffee, but it also makes tea. And as the weather gets warm, you want to think about batched iced lattes, batched cold brew. This machine can do it all. So it adds versatility, a level up in quality. Visit them over at groundcontrol.coffee for more information. I really think if you're into the idea of leveling up your batch brew coffee, increasing your efficiency and innovation in the store, then the Ground Control Cyclops Brewer is for you. Again, for more information, go visit them at groundcontrol.coffee. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Barista Series from Pacific. This is the line of plant-based performance beverages that is designed for and tested by the world's best baristas before it even makes its way onto your counters. And that's why it performs so well on the bar and is loved by so many coffee shops and baristas around the world. It stands up to the heat from steaming, produces amazing texture, great for latte art, and also keeps the beverages balanced, the taste of it focused on the coffee. Your customers will absolutely love this. I think you will too. Visit them over at pacificfoodservice.com and get it in your store. Just try it for yourself. If you want to serve the best plant-based beverages to your customers, then I think you should be using the Barista Series from Pacific. Okay, everybody. Well, today we are going to be having a conversation that I think is really going to help inspire and deepen your thoughts around the idea of coffee quality, hospitality, coffee trade, and more. We're talking with Martell Mason, who is the co-founder of the Sepia Coffee Project, which is a boutique roastery based in Detroit's North End. Although a native of the city of Detroit, Martell has lived a very nomadic life, with years spent throughout Asia, East Africa, and Scandinavia, with a BA in International Affairs and grad work specializing in sustainability and coffee value chains. Martell continues to search for ways to bridge the gap from farm to cup while ensuring there is greater representation of all persons involved, with an emphasis placed on those of color. Now, in 2017, he established Arabica Trading House in Istanbul, Turkey, being one of the first specialty traders to import high-quality, transparent coffees direct from origin. And pivoting from the shocks of the pandemic, Martell arrived in the U.S. in 2021 and saw an opportunity to be of service to a young yet vibrant coffee community in Detroit. So Sepia Coffee Project's mission is to make specialty coffee more accessible to underserved markets, creating a more inclusive and equitable platform for coffee consumers, industry peers, and the greater community at large. And so in this conversation, we are going to get to kind of travel around the world with Martell and hear his story about getting into the coffee industry and the events throughout that time that have shaped his view on the community, on hospitality, on trade, on quality, and everything that's led up to this current project of the Sepia Coffee Project. And I guarantee this is going to be really thought-provoking. Martell is doing great work, and I'm excited that we get to talk with him about this. So let's get right to it. Here now is my conversation with the co-founder of the Sepia Coffee Project, Martell Mason. Well, Martell, welcome to Keys to the Shop. Really excited to be talking with you today. How's it going?
Hey, Chris. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure. And, you come highly recommended by friends in the industry. And as I've been told, you are a citizen of the world. You've traveled quite a bit in coffee, and I'm excited to kind of, hear your perspective on coffee and especially what's led up to your current project with the Sepia Coffee Project. So let's kind of dive into a little bit of how you've entered into the coffee industry and what's led to you being somewhat, nomadic in coffee. Talk about how you discovered coffee and then specialty coffee in particular.
Sure. I kind of tell people that my coffee world started quite early. You grew up in the mid 90s. So, this idea of specialty coffee was starting to brew in different parts of the U.S. And, when I turned 16, the first job that I had was actually at Starbucks. I always mention Starbucks in conversation with talking about my life in coffee because, although Starbucks can sometimes get a bad rap, I think in the 90s, it was really one of the only opportunities that some of us had in order to experience what we, believe to be specialty coffee. So I started at 16. It was my first job, and I worked for Starbucks up until I went into college. And during that period, although we weren't doing cupping sessions and all of these types of things, we did have these opportunities where, we would sit down and we would talk about some of the single origins that were being promoted or introduced into the lineup. And so, for me, that was kind of the first experience of being able to learn about origin and knowing that there are different types of processes of coffee. And that always stuck with me. Yes, we were just kind of, making, espressos and lattes, but, I believe that there was a very solid foundation and story behind what Starbucks was hoping to achieve, on a global scale. So those few years that I had working as a barista were the foundation. And throughout my life, that kind of has always kind of been there, and I've always gone back to it because, I think, it definitely was the stepping stone to get me to where I am today. Fast forwarding a little bit, we get into the early 2000s, and, that's when we really started seeing a lot of indie cafes opening, a lot of roasters really getting into the mix. And I studied on the East Coast in Providence and in Boston. So during that time, there was just this really great energy when it came to discovering new different types of coffees and again, just checking out the local roaster. So I always had this connection and interest in coffee at a very young age. Of course, life takes you into different directions, but at the end of the day, coffee was always a part of my daily grind. And so that was kind of the beginning for me, with Starbucks being kind of the focus there. Where specialty coffee really came into play was when I moved to South Korea. I left the States back in 2008, 2009. I was living in Egypt and just pretty much just living there, learning Arabic and just trying to understand culture and so forth. And a friend said, "Hey, are you interested in teaching English?" And I said, "Not really, but tell me all about it." And ultimately, I ended up applying for a position in South Korea to teach at a local academy. And this was in 2010. When I arrived to South Korea, specialty coffee was booming. I think every block there was probably 5 or 6 coffee shops, and they were all full. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. Like, I love this energy. And I just got back into kind of the coffee game. It was really, really great seeing a lot of these indie roasters really coming up with some really amazing concepts, very welcoming. And it was around 2010, 2011, where I said, okay, you know what? I think I want to get back into coffee in some way, shape, or form. And so that was kind of the introduction for me with what we would consider to be specialty coffee.
So all around the world, and this is obviously a industry that's meaningful to you, it seems, because of the kind of attachment it has to culture and story, it seems. You mentioned that early on as you're praising your experiences at Starbucks for connecting story and all of that to coffee. Is that something that's of value to you and that really kind of cemented your interest early on?
Definitely. So my academic background is in the social sciences. So I have a BA in international affairs, focused on Middle East studies. And then my grad work has focused on sustainability, value chains, supply chains. So being able to make a connection, networking with people is essential. When we think of business and economics, yes, it's all about the bottom line. But for me, there's a greater focus on understanding the people who are involved. And so wherever I go, again, with this kind of nomadic perspective, I try to connect with as many people as I can. And so every single place that I have gone to, it's not about seeing the sights necessarily, but actually, sitting down with a person and having a cup of coffee or having a cup of tea, and just being able to learn and understand, kind of the day-to-day for everyone. What are their interests, what they like, what they don't like, as a whole. And so that just allows for me to learn and to grow. And so that's a huge part of what I do on a daily basis when it comes to coffee. Coffee is, it's like food in the sense that, we all come together. And so I really enjoy those experiences of being able to try new things with people.
It's interesting. I want to kind of dwell on that a little bit, because as you talk about having your focus of academic study in supply chain and social sciences, it seems to me that a lot of the value of those things in a market is based on the fact that they represent some aspect of a story, in that beyond a certain point, once things become too transactional and are a little bit more sanitized of the story, the value starts to diminish. And so I'm curious what your perspective on that is, in terms of, yes, it's economic, but it seems like the economics are directly impacted by, preserving the story attached to the thing itself.
That's true. I would say, before I started field work for grad school, all that I knew was kind of the front end of the business, making lattes and being in a coffee shop. But there wasn't really a lot of understanding of what went on behind the scenes. And, my first origin trip was in 2014 to Tanzania. It was that experience where it just opened up a completely new world in regards to how supply chains work, but also seeing how many people on the ground are connected to this product. And so for me, it was very important to build those relationships and to physically be on the ground working with people. So I've worked on farms, I've harvested coffee, I've seen that process of taking it to auction. So for me, that was very, very important so that I could bring some of that story and that experience back to the table. A lot of us don't know, commodities are everywhere. We buy, every single day we're buying a product, but sometimes we just don't know who's involved and where those products come from. So for me, telling that story and being able to get the layman, the regular person on the street to understand that, yes, you have a role in how, these farmers' lives are going to be impacted. And so if we have a better understanding of a supply chain and, how we trade, that can help us in the long run to improve lives and to improve systems, right? Because in some ways, these systems are still a bit broken. And so it's just great for us to now be bridging that gap so that people can see, it's possible for me to connect with those people as well.
Right. So the system solution is not purely a system, it's more human, and it has to have nuance to it.
Yes, I agree.
So after all of this experience in traveling the world and making connections and experiencing the culture both on the farm and in the cafe, at some point, you would have to, or you have started to put a creative hand to the industry. So you've been learning, you're studying and being impacted by this, and now you're taking something on and affecting change yourself and putting something out there that's creative. How did that start for you? What were the first steps in entering into the industry in that capacity?
That's a good question. So I would say in the beginning, just saying that, we're all influenced by something. Our surroundings, our environment, they influence us, right? So, if a market is telling me that, you must have an 86 or an 88 point coffee on SCA scale, that's what you gravitate towards. When I started getting into specialty coffee after doing a little field work at Origin, what I really wanted to do was try to understand the sales markets. So in the summer of 2014, after leaving Tanzania, I did a 6-week tour of Scandinavia. I went from Norway to Denmark to Sweden to Finland, and I was meeting with roasters and with importers in Scandinavia to try to better understand the end of the supply chain. During this period, as we all know, and coffee community, Scandinavia had really taken off. Everyone wanted that Nordic roast. They wanted those profiles and flavors that were coming from Oslo and Stockholm. And so, I really wanted to connect with some of those people and really understand what was going on. So in the summer of 2014, I met with Melanie Leeson from Collaborative Coffee Source. We had a cupping session, and I just really enjoyed this opportunity. Melanie is Canadian, but she is Chinese Korean, and so the fact that I had this Asian woman from Canada living in Oslo, for me, that was just very, very cool, because there weren't a lot of people of color in the industry that I saw where I felt like, oh, okay, I can really be a part of this. So it was really, really great to connect with Melanie and CCS during this time. That summer was incredible. I was able to really get a sense of what coffee culture was in Nordic countries. With that being said, fast forwarding into 2016, I wanted to do an internship in Scandinavia to just, again, understand supply chains, to connect and network with that community. And I was able to intern with CCS in Oslo. During that period, I also still traveled to Origin. I was in Ethiopia as well as Kenya in 2016 and 2017. What I ultimately learned, or what kind of came to light to me, was that I do love and appreciate the quality right, of what we refer to as specialty coffee, right? Anything that is 80 plus point in score, but knowing that majority of the market truly loves something that is an 86 plus, or, maybe if you can find a 90 plus coffee, but that's not the mainstream. The mainstream is that 90% of production that is going into, commercial markets. And so this is what I learned on the farm, is that, although we do want to really showcase and highlight these incredible profiles that can come from lots of sorting and different fermentation processes, and having a team on a farm that can manage that, but knowing that majority of the coffee that is still being exported is commercial. And so having worked in Europe, West Asia, and have been in Africa, I in some ways had a greater appreciation for producers who were trying to still promote what I would call mainstream coffees, to show that there's still something in the cup. When we think about, the livelihoods of farmers, if 90% is still mainstream coffee, then we must take into account that the farmer's income is still 90% of that mainstream. Mm-hmm. So we can't just reject and disregard that. We have to somehow be able to also tell that story. And so when I started Arabica Trading House in Istanbul, I knew that the Turkish market, as well as other parts of West Asia, Saudi, Qatar, and Kuwait, Iran, that most of the specialty roasters who were on the scene, they did want these high quality coffees. But at the end of the day, it was important for them to also have a solid mainstream coffee that they could use for those Turkish coffee blends, for their espresso blends. West Asia still roasts pretty dark. And so, the commoner is used to a certain profile. And so with that, you don't necessarily need an 88 point coffee in order to produce an espresso for that wholesale account. So for me, I saw an opportunity to bridge that area, to not make it so gray in the sense that, we don't want those coffees on our offering list, but to be able to say, hey, this is an 80 point coffee. However, this is what you can find in a cup, and this is how it will help. Coffee for me is coffee. And I think we need to be able to promote and highlight on each level. And so that's what I learned with my experience in Europe, and dealing with high specialty coffees, but also being on the farm and understanding that majority of the coffee that is being sent out is mainstream.
Okay, so obviously, and I really sympathize with a lot of what you're saying here, and I'm 100% on board with the idea of promoting a lot more of the mainstream coffees and finding a home for those coffees. And, not to call it devil's advocate, but maybe, there's a lot of fear that goes into rejection of those coffees, I think. Maybe just because of the momentum of the current marketing machine that says, we have to have quality coffee or else customers won't buy it, and then no one can grow coffee, which may be a little bit overwrought in terms of, it may not be that black and white, right? But it sounds like, quality is a spectrum. It depends on what you're looking for in a coffee. And I guess you wouldn't really know to look for it unless we told you what was in the coffee. And so maybe there's a metric of intentionality that has to be, utilized in specialty coffee to say, like, we intentionally bought this. It's not a flaw. It's, this is intentionally a coffee that's being used in a blend because it's got these qualities in it. Not, we're putting this in a blend because, it's crappy coffee, and that's why we're doing it.
Chris, that's exactly right. If we think about the history of coffee, I've lived and worked in, a part of the world that really helped to bring coffee to where it is today. The Turkey, when we think of the Ottoman Empire, I mean, they were the ones trading, for centuries, right? When we think of Arabia, Saudi, they have this very long history with coffee culture. And so, for me, being in that part of the world and just seeing, the energy that was there when it comes to coffee, how it's prepared, that experience, to know that, they understand coffee, and so for them, it's just like drinking water in a way. But it's not necessarily about, again, having the highest point score. I think we put a lot of labels on, certifications, on point scores. And I think it ultimately is, how can we use that coffee and the best way? How can we highlight those characteristics? And, when you're looking at, these, when you're looking at just macro production, that's what you need. You need to be able to have higher volumes of a product that will allow for you to have that consistency, right? And so a micro lot is not going to necessarily be to your best benefit if you are trying to really push out a product that an entire country can enjoy. When I'm thinking of some of these medium and large roasters that have really great customer base, and they need to be able to have a little bit more consistency with the coffees that they have on the table.
Right. So you're still using a quality metric of consistency, and we're not giving up quality in favor of just saying whatever you grow, we're going to buy, roast, and sell. I mean, there has to be a line at which that conversation is had, and consistency might be one of those conversations. But beyond that, you're not asking people to just say, "Don't worry about how it tastes. Worry about who you can fit with that coffee."
That's correct. Again, transparency is important. That's how we tell that story. And so I think if we know, where a coffee is coming from, and that the process that was put into bringing it to market, that is where we want that story to be. But it's one of those things where it changes, right? Our perspectives change, and so that we're human in that way, and maybe in 5 years we will be even talking more about Robusta coffee, right? I mean, there's a market growing and buzzing there. So, I think that there are a lot of opportunities within the industry. At the end of the day, for me, it's important to be able to try to find an opportunity for smallholder farmers and producers to have more equity, right? And so that's part of what we're doing here at Sepia Coffee Project, is to be able to have a bit more inclusion, but also work on how can we improve equity and what we do.
Right. Well, let's talk about that because obviously this is addressing the downstream impact of perspectives on coffee quality, both on the consumer level and on the farmer level, those two groups in particular. So how did you first conceive of the Sepia Coffee Project? And as you've alluded to, I would like you to elaborate a little bit more on the mission of it and what really has gone into, establishing that mission.
Of course, we all know that the pandemic definitely caused a lot of us to pivot. I think we're very resilient people, and so at the end of the day, I think a lot of us said, okay, this is not working, so we have to move on to the next thing. The idea for the Sepia Coffee Project actually started several years ago when I was, working in the Gulf, Saudi, Qatar, Kuwait. Having lived and worked in that part of the world for many years, when we think of the workforce, majority of the workforce are migrants, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and parts of Africa. When we think of coffee culture, specialty coffee, cafes, and roasters, majority of the workers who are working in these companies are migrant workers. So over the years, I built these relationships with really, really great people, baristas and roasters from, all walks of life, coming from, India, from Bangladesh, from the Philippines, Indonesia, Kenya, and I just love the fact that they have migrated to another place and they've created these communities within communities. And so I was just always admired their energy and just their resolve and just being able to just push through. But when we think of it from social science, geopolitical standpoint, we know that, work relationships in this part of the world are not the best. There are still some restrictions. There are a lot of challenges that workers there face. And for me, that was always kind of on the back end of my observation is how could we improve this experience, right? It's not just a matter of having a smile and making a latte and giving it to that customer. How can you, again, tell a story? So I'll just give a quick example. When I would do my observations in cafes and roasteries throughout the Middle East, I would always try to have a real conversation with the barista. So I would ask questions about their coffees and origin, and in many ways they were always a bit timid. I would ask, what part of Ethiopia did the coffee come from? Because maybe it wasn't on the label. Oh, we can't tell you. We can't tell you that, but it's coming from Guji. But maybe they can't tell me exactly who the producer is. And I think this is because management, they have this sense of, oh, someone is going to copy us or someone's going to find the same coffee. And so there was always this sense of, I can present the coffee to you, but that's pretty much it. I would, majority of the baristas that I would come in contact with were Filipino. And so I would always mention there's a coffee in the Philippines called Baraka. I believe it is Liberica species. And so I would mention sometimes, oh yeah, I've had Baraka, a few times, and their eyes would light up. It's like, how do you know about this? And I said, well, we're coffee people. We travel the world, and this is part of what we do. So the Philippines grows coffee. I think everyone should know that. And so they were always just quite surprised, but also happy that, wow, this guy he actually knows a lot, and he's really trying to connect with me. So around 2018, I on one of these trips, I said, it would be really, really cool in this part of the world to start a cafe or a roastery that had the ideals and ethos of like a B Corp. So how could you have equity? How could you have workers that are not just working, but they're actually a partner within the business? And so I had researched to see, are B Corps in any part of West Asia? And it seemed as if there were some organizations that were trying to promote this idea of equity, but given the work structure, when it comes to visas and all these types of things, I think that probably has been a challenge for creating this type of a system in that part of the world. But when I was thinking of it, I said, it would be great to create this project and to onboard, these amazing people from, again, all over the world coming to this, this region in order to work. And that's when I started just writing down in my Black book, just brainstorming and thinking of how could I put this together. So that was 2018. We fast forward, we're going through the pandemic. Again, we all have to adjust and pivot to the new environment. And when I flew back to the States last year in 2021, I came to my hometown in Detroit, and I was just really happy to see that there was massive development and just a new energy in the city. I left Detroit 20 years ago. I left right out of high school, went right to college, and I had not been a resident of Detroit since. And so for me, it was I was being re-welcomed into this city, and I just see a lot of opportunity. And so I took the spring of last year to really try to think about what could I do here that could benefit some of the community. And what I found was that specialty coffee is growing here. There are roasters popping up. I could name a few of them, but I'm sure you know them. And it's great to kind of see that there is this coffee culture growing. However, it's only in a small pocket of Detroit. In many ways, and we've heard it with everything that's been going on since 2020. Gentrification is real and it's happening, and Detroit is no exception. And so what I found was that the really nice cafes and the roasters are pretty much in a gentrified pocket. Mm-hmm. But Detroit has a population of 1 million, and to get from east to west, it could easily take you 45 minutes to drive. Right. So why is it that, we have all of these cafes and roasters within a 2-mile radius? And so when I was trying to think of what opportunity is here, what could I do? This idea that I had back in the Middle East for equity and inclusion came back to the surface. And so that's where the idea of Sepia Coffee Project began. When I came up with the brand name, I was focused on, again, inclusion. We have gone through a period where there was this intensity for Black Lives Matter. And as a Black man, it was definitely something that was just on the surface for me, that was there, and I felt everything that was around me. But I also knew within coffee and within the coffee community that it's collective. It's collective. So when I thought of Sepia Coffee Project, I said, we all have to come together as a community. We have to be able to sit down and have that discussion. And so that's where the name, the brand, the color scheme and logo comes from, is this idea that we can all come together, for a cup and really try to promote, to move it into a stronger direction, I guess. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but going back to where we have this radius of cafes and roasters, I knew that there was a much larger community that was being underserved, that was still in a sense marginalized. And that was the greater Detroit area. There are lots of Black and brown people that, go, to the suburbs in order to get a coffee, or again, have to drive, 3 or 4 miles in order to get to a nice cafe that's in the city. And so I saw an opportunity to try to move some of that out of that small demographic and to try to welcome more people into, what we consider to be coffee culture. We all drink coffee. It's just a matter of, again, being able to tell a story with that coffee. And so what we want to do at Sepia Coffee Project is to introduce that to greater Detroit and to really get some of these enclaves within our city to appreciate coffee in a different way.
That's really interesting. And I'm thinking back to your journey in coffee and the idea of what defines specialty coffee and quality, and how there are so many layers and tones of coffee that are disregarded because they might not guarantee a particular outcome. They're not being given a chance necessarily, and it feels like you could, apply that over, socially with what you're talking about with marginalized communities in cities like Detroit, where it's a better, it's a better prospect for people, in quotes, better to say, let's just stick to this one area because we know we can be successful, so to speak, in that area. And so as we were talking about the systems and metrics devoid of humanity becomes so transactional, then you leave humanity behind. And so it seems that bridge you're creating is reconnecting humanity with this industry of coffee, and it's not a gamble. It's actually at the heart of what makes it successful.
Yes, I agree. I guess the best, the easiest way to describe it is we know the idea concept of food deserts,
Mm-hmm.
right? There are food deserts throughout the United States. You go to every urban area and you will find a food desert. I coined this as a coffee desert. Just like we have, these food disparities, I feel like when it comes to, again, coffee culture and kind of what we see as coffee within the specialty movement, it's lacking, and so I think that there's just a great opportunity. And so what we want to do is just open up that door. We want to welcome people and again, just get them interested in drinking coffee. I think there's a lot that we can do on the ground here, and that will lead to other things. It's not just about coffee. We're kind of creating this foundation, but that could lead to, other prospects. There's a lot that can be said about the growth again in Detroit. And so there are a lot of organizations that, could get involved. So it's not just coffee. It's not just about, again, food. But, maybe, there's an opportunity for us to be a platform for businesses to seek resources. I think that, that's something that is going to ultimately become a part of what we do within our ethos. I mean, we're a work in progress. I use the term small is beautiful a lot. I don't know if you've read the book, but, like for me, just really trying to look at something, to hone in and to appreciate it, and then see how that naturally takes shape. And so that's kind of what we want to do here. So yes, we're selling coffee, but at the end of the day, what we want to do is to really try to enrich communities and get people to see that they do have the ability to be a part of change and to be a part of the growth and development that is happening in many urban cities around the country.
Well said. Yeah, we just had a Founder Friday episode as we're recording this that aired this morning with Diana Martinez of Cafe Calle in South Central Los Angeles, which started as a table on the sidewalk and now is a brick and mortar, 2 weeks old, serving coffee to a largely Salvadorian community. And it's taking off, and lots of opportunities for the community to kind of come around that one expression that an entrepreneur took a dream and said, we're going to do this. And I just can't, using a metaphor of thinking about raindrops and how there's this a grain of dust, they say, that a raindrop forms around. So there's something that you're able to grab onto, and when somebody like yourself starts to make things happen in a community, it's noticed, and that collective that you're talking about starts to actually coalesce. People start gathering around that, and coffee is especially electric in that way. Historically, you can see so much change happening just on the basis of there being a coffee shop, except you're doing the reverse of what a lot of people see happening with gentrification. So when a coffee shop comes into the neighborhood, usually people are like, that's the end, where it's this signals something bad. But it's like you're reclaiming that by saying, this is a coffee company, and what's going to come in with this is a lot of good things instead.
Yes, and to also go with the point, Detroit is majority is African American, but what I think a lot of people don't know is that we do have a very diverse community. We have the largest Muslim population, right? Dearborn, that's where you have the majority of your Lebanese, Yemeni, Palestinian communities. When we think of Hamtramck, before was predominantly Polish, but now there's a very large Yemeni and Bangladeshi population. So we have the Chaldeans, which are the Christian Iraqis. These are communities that are Detroit. And so what I want to do is to also highlight those communities, because they are coffee communities. Coffee is a part of their lives as well. And so we want to highlight that, right? I think it hasn't been recognized. Why aren't we drinking more Arabic coffee or Turkish coffee, right? And so, we're roasting some coffees right now that we think are going to be perfect for this market. And so this is what we want to do, right? It's not again not trying to just hover over it, but it's not for me just a Black thing. It is a let's get the community together. So all people, right? But again, highlighting those people of color. I can't forget Mexican Town, right? We have a very large Mexican population as well. So we have a Mexican washed coffee from Chiapas that we really, really love. And so, we just want to try to tell these stories, but also show that that these communities are the heart of Detroit.
There's an underlying assumption that coffee is for a particular community, and that coffee is expressed in a very particular way. And when I hear you say these are coffee communities, you're starting with the assumption that that's the case, rather than trying to convince yourself and saying, that we're gonna get them to be coffee communities. It's more like that's already there for them. You just need to meet them where they are.
That's it. Exactly. They've always been there. And we have seen them, but maybe not have seen them. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's, it's like we just, there's a lot around you that sometimes you just don't notice, that it's there. And so having, again, had this nomadic experience and lived in so many different parts, sensory for me is everything. And so I love being able to observe and just get a better sense and feeling of my surroundings. And so having been back, this past year, it really has been a great experience. And I'm looking forward to what Sepia Coffee Project can do within the coffee community. But again, it's just great to see that, that change is possible, development is possible, and in a way that doesn't exclude people. And so it's just really, really great to be back in the States and working on a project that I think can make this community better, one cup at a time, as they say.
As they say, that's right. The they is us in the coffee industry.
Yeah.
I love what you said, that we see people, but we don't really see them. And it feels like that's the actual definition of marginalization. Except for you say it's peripheral. So I can see things on the side, but my focus is right in front of me, and it just requires turning your head, and in this case, the industry, to focus, and that's what you're doing, is you're turning to focus on that which was in the periphery. And again, it leads me to my next question here, which is about the industry in general, which is kind of an unfair question because there's so many different facets of it, but what can the specialty coffee community do to build inroads and to tear down roadblocks that could, that do keep certain communities from embracing and benefiting from coffee culture?
Well, I would say, over the last couple of years, we've made some strides, and so that's been great. But the easiest way for me that I can say is when it comes to inclusion, equity, getting more people involved, is that we have to start from the ground, wherever that is. So, when I started doing my studies and field work, trying to understand supply chains, it always made me, I just never really understood why coffee was still traded in New York and London. Right. It's coming from, mainly Southern Hemisphere. Why aren't coffees, futures and, why aren't they traded elsewhere? And when I think of this, the specialty coffee associations, organizations, it's still very heavy and on the Northern Hemisphere. So if we think of SCA, for example, the expo is coming up in Boston, and how about having these conferences and areas where we could actually promote and help to grow coffee culture. Unfortunately, New Orleans, it was just not the right time last year, right? But I think that would have been a great opportunity because you have such a diverse community there in New Orleans. But what about Detroit? I think it could be an awesome place to have an expo in the coming years, right? What about Philadelphia, right? So, I think that we have to kind of think about it in the sense that, we have to go into some of those unknown places. World of Coffee, we're just learning that, they're moving it from Poland to Italy. Why not have a World of Coffee in Nairobi? Why not in Johannesburg? Jakarta? So I think what we have to do in order to learn more about where this product is coming from is to have more opportunities where we are at origin. And so for me, I think that would be a huge part of it. It's not just about your Instagram and social media showing that you are including these people, but how about we actually go to those farms, we go to those people and we say, hey, without you, we wouldn't be here. Right. So, World of Coffee, if you're listening, I would love for you guys to do a World of Coffee in Africa. I mean, you went to Dubai and that was great, but let's go a little further south.
There you go. You're listening. I think it's great to, think about the fact that it's easy to market inclusion and empowerment, but the actual work of doing it often is just not something you're able to post about. It's really not something that you might even have time to post about because of the work you're doing. We interviewed Thalion Tremaine, who's operating as the president of Pachamama, a coffee cooperative, and he works for the farmers who own the supply chain for the cooperative farmers, right? So it's not just we're throwing some money back to origin. It's the origin is actually paying workers in the States, and it's a reverse of the power structure we normally see. But that took a very, very long time to really get instituted, and it's not flashy, but it's substantive change. And so it feels like we might need to shed some of our preoccupation with recognition before we could start to actually include people the way that we say we do.
Yes, I agree. Social media is important for us. We probably wouldn't be having this podcast if it was not for some of the facets of social media. But yes, I think that, we have to not necessarily put too much of a focus on filtering a picture or a narrative, but being there and being able to, again, kind of tell a fuller story. So those are things that you're not going to be able to do through your social media network, right? This is more dialogue. This is, again, coming to the table. So I think we have to have more of that one-on-one, and then knowing that it is reaching a larger mass. But I guess we have to find the balance, right? These days, we can't necessarily just turn off Instagram, but right. How can we use that platform so that it's more beneficial and there are more resources available for people to take more time, outside of just looking at that post to understand and try to learn more and to get, to educate themselves on what is really going on. So I think, the conferences that we're having, what's great is that there are more lectures involved in these types of platforms. And so that does open up that door and allow for people to really tell those deeper stories about what's happening. And so I'm not saying, conferences are not great. We're going to Boston in 2 weeks, and we can't wait to see everybody at the expo, but it's also, again, great to be able to sit down at the table and to have real discussion.
Love it. So in your pursuit of doing that with the Sepia Project, what is next? What's on the docket for the project itself, its offerings and expressions?
So our current offering, having been in the trade side of business for several years, there were always producers and suppliers that I wanted to work with, but just didn't have the resources to do so. It was working in Turkey was definitely a challenge. There were a lot of there was a lot of red tape, a lot of gray area, and so it wasn't feasible to try to get some of the producers that I really wanted to work with into that market. But being back in the U.S., those coffees are relatively available, and so we've really brought something that we think is just very special to the table. So we're working with some great producers, and it'll be great to be able to develop these relationships and see what we can do in the coming harvest seasons. So our offering is, I think our offering will definitely tell a story. We're looking forward to sending that out to everyone, to the world. We just opened up our roastery, and we're really focusing mainly on wholesale distribution throughout Metro Detroit, but also some pockets of the East Coast. We have our e-commerce up, so we're doing some online retail, which is really amazing, and starting to work a little bit on our Instagram platform for social media. In the coming months, we want to open up our roastery to the general public in the form of a tasting room. So we'll really just be focusing on brewing really, really nice single origin coffees and highlighting all those nuances that each cup profile has. So we'll have a tasting room that'll be up around April 14th, so right after the expo in Boston. And then hopefully by summer, we want to introduce a small little pilot of a coffee container. Versus doing a brick and mortar cafe, what we really wanted to do is try to have something that was semi-mobile. So not a food truck, but just a container that we can find a really great location to set up for the summer. It'll essentially be a pop-up. We'll test it, see how it goes, and see if there's an opportunity for us to have something that's more long-term. So coffee container for Sepia Coffee Project coming up this summer.
Wow, you got a lot going on, and I'm really glad that you are doing this work, and can't wait to see the progress of the Sepia Coffee Project. And again, it's desperately needed, and I'm glad that you're taking this on. So where can we stay in contact with you and this project so we can just visit you and just be updated?
Yeah, well, definitely sepiacoffeeproject.com, but also check us out on Instagram. Our ID is SCP Detroit. So yeah, check us out there. And if you're in Boston at the expo, we'll definitely be serving some coffees. We'll be at two booths, one with CCRE and BD Imports. That's with Phyllis Johnson. And we'll also be at the Artisan Cafe with La Marzocco. So yeah, definitely if you're in Boston, check us out. And if you're in Detroit, please stop by. On our website, you'll see our boutique roastery address there. And yeah, we'll definitely love to have you over for a cup.
Awesome. Well, we've loved having you here on the show. Martell, thank you so much.
And thank you, Chris. And one thing I wanted to say was thanks for providing this platform for so many people. I think it's great that, we are, despite where we are and different parts of the world, that, we can come together, even if it's just virtually, we can come together, talk about coffee, talk about the things that we need to do in order to just make it more accessible to the greater public. So I appreciate what you're doing and look forward to future podcasts with other great people around the world that are just doing amazing things in coffee. So thank you for that.
Well, everybody, I really hope that you enjoyed that conversation. and that it made you think a lot more deeply about the kinds of decisions you make with your business and the impact that our mindset and philosophy on quality and hospitality has downstream. In the moment, we have lots of thoughts and we have lots of decisions that we make, and we don't think too much of it. But it really does altogether create the reality that future generations are going to live into. And so we really should be aware of how we are welcoming those in our community to the table for coffee, and how welcoming we are in the coffee industry to those who are producing coffee, and our role in helping them be successful in that endeavor as well. And so a big thank you to Martell for joining us on the show today and inspiring us in this way. I'm really thankful for people like him out there in the industry, and we absolutely need more projects out there like the Sepia Coffee Project. If you want to learn more about the Sepia Coffee Project, all you have to do is go to the website sepiacoffeeproject.com, and that's where you can find all the information that you need to know. You can also follow them on Instagram at SCP Detroit. And so if you have any questions, comments, or feedback from me about today's episode or any episode of Keys to the Shop, feel free to email me, chris@keystotheshop.com, and that's also where you can reach out for Keys to the Shop consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, I want to let you all know that the rest of this year, there's a great event going on that will really equip you and your team to have a thriving coffee shop business. That is none other than the Coffee Fest trade show. We just had the first show of the year in New York, and the remaining calendar for the rest of the year is Chicago, Los Angeles, and then Seattle. So there's plenty of time for you to go to coffeefest.com and learn more about these shows and all of the free or really accessibly priced educational sessions, lectures, workshops, and trainings. There's an amazing show floor with tons of great vendors, a great community, competitions. It is actually a festival of coffee. That's why they call it Coffee Fest, I think. So anyway, I'm at all of these shows, giving lectures and judging latte art. I really hope to see you there. And you can get 50% off, by the way, your registration fee when you go to coffeefest.com and use the code KEYS. Then you will get 50% off, and that is a really great deal. So remember, for 2022, if you are registering to go to Chicago, Los Angeles, or Seattle, make sure that you are using the code KEYS when you do so to get 50% off your fee. Again, for more information about this amazing event that I think is the best event out there to help enrich the retail coffee community, go to coffeefest.com. And with that, that is the end of our show today, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this conversation between myself and Martell Mason, the Sepia Coffee Project. Have an awesome day, and as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.